What's up, everybody? How's it going? Trevor here with Pastor Daniel, and we are so pumped to be back for the second week of our Fresh Faith, 5 Minutes of Faith, Part 2.
Part 2.
Did you have fun last week?
We did. We only went over a minute, so
Only
hang
a
tight.
minute.
It may be 6, but we're going to try to do it in 5.
We're going to try to do this in 5 minutes. We're going to recap a little bit of Pastor's message, talk a little about it, see how it applies to our lives. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it. We're going to hit the clock, and we're rolling. So, Pastor, you talked a lot about this week of what it means to get a word from God. Your sermon was called A Word from God, right? Maybe you've heard that, like if you're watching online right now, someone maybe said that, or a pastor said they have a word from God when they get up to preach. We hear that maybe if you've grown up in church before. Explain that a little bit. What does that mean to have a word from God?
Yeah, when you look through the scriptures, when you look at the New Testament, there's two Greek words for the word in the Bible. And a lot of times when we think of somebody like, how does God speak to me? I need a word from God. And how I know if a word for you, word for me. And, every Sunday I stand up and I preach one of those words, and the word is called Logos. And when you see the word Logos, it means the completed written word of God. In fact, I have my Bible right here. This is my Logos. It's not a Bible software, by the way. I love the Bible software. But it's the completed word of God. But when I stand here on Sunday and I preach, you have someone who's like a teenager, and then you have a 20-year-old, a college student, a 70-year-old, and like, how do you preach the Logos specifically to each one of them? Well, that's not my responsibility. That's the second word that we see in the Greek text, which is rhema. And that was a personal, powerful, present word for you. So that's why on Sunday mornings I can stand and preach, and someone's sitting there going, who's a teenager going, God just spoke to me that, I should really go after the basketball team, or I should really go after my school for Christ. And I just felt the impression that that's the word I've got. Then you have a 60-year-old going, I just got to believe by faith that God's going to save my grandchild, and I was going to trust that God's going to do a work in their life. And he spoke to them. That is what was called a rhema. So it was a personal word just for them. And what I talked about that Sunday is that my faith is initiated when I get that word.
Yeah.
When I hear that specific word for me, it sparks my faith.
Yeah. I know kind of we moved past that in the sermon a little bit, and we began to talk about what it looks like to take next steps in response to a word from God. Like we're in that setting, maybe in the church setting, and you're preaching, out of Scripture to us, and we feel like God's given us a specific word about our life. Maybe that's to, pray before our basketball games if you're on a sports team, or whatever it may be for you. But you mentioned how like you're always going to have a next step after that, and that's going to activate something for you to do and kind of like act in obedience. Explain that a little bit more to us.
So I get a word from God. I don't know what it means. Maybe it's go back to school. Maybe start that business. Maybe ask her out. We talked about that a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's for you. You got faith, right, to ask her out. You feel like, God's asked you to do something. Forgive somebody. Go bless that family. So that's great that you got a word from God that initiated the faith. But what am I going to believe that it came from Him? Am I going to believe that it's true? And that belief that I have, either I'm going to believe or I'm not going to believe. And it's in that belief that activates my faith that I'm going to believe that's from God. But it will be demonstrated to the world when I take that step.
Yeah.
So I can say, James says it, you have faith, awesome. I'm going to show you by my faith, by my obedience, by my works that I do. So if God has spoken to you, He always calls you to take a step. He will always call you to take a next step.
Yeah.
So faith comes as, do I really believe and trust that He spoke to me, and therefore I will take the next step that He has for me. And so really, when we look about that, there's a story in the Bible talking about Peter. And there's if you're familiar with the story, it was kind of crazy. It was awesome. I mean, Peter gets to walk on water. I mean, are you kidding me? Who like if that happened now, like he's coming to everybody's pool party. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't worry about the clowns. Get Peter here. He's gonna walk on water, and all the kids gonna love it. But it displays that because we see that your faith is initiated when God gives you a rhema, when He speaks to you. It's activated when I believe. I'm going to believe and trust that God just spoke to me. But it shows the world. It shows that I demonstrate my faith when I take that next step. So we see, here's these guys doing a boat, and a big storm comes. Jesus has been up on the mountain praying, and He comes to them onto the water. And Peter and Jesus has this conversation back and forth. It's kind of crazy. And Peter says something so bold. He says, if it's really you, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I thought you were a ghost, but if it's you, tell me to come. And then he gets a rhema.
Yeah.
He gets a word that's just for Peter. You see all the disciples get ripped in that because they didn't get out of the boat. Well, He didn't ask them to get out of the boat. That was His word. And that's the problem with a lot of people. We're trying to claim somebody else's word.
That's good.
We're trying to be someone. That was for them. That was for that person, not for you or for me. But He says, come. And so Peter's faith was initiated by that invitation to come.
Yeah.
But then he had to choose, am I going to believe it or not? And we know he believed it because he stepped out of the boat. And
Yeah.
he took that next step. And he walked on water. And it's demonstrated his faith to all of his peers, to the Lord and to himself that he believed by taking that step. So I believe, and we say this all the time, following Jesus is taking the next
Yeah.
step. And everyone has the amount of faith in them to take it. You just got to trust it and
Yeah.
then take that next step.
I love how you mentioned the idea of if you want to really grow in your faith, it's really about your obedience more so than anything else. Like that's really a thing. I think you said it will activate or deactivate your faith. Like when God speaks that word to you, choosing what you're going to do or not do is really going to determine how much your faith grows. Kind of in those moments.
Well, so many people say, "Man, I just wish I had faith. I want more
Yeah.
faith. Give me more faith." Even the disciples asked that. Increase our faith.
Yeah.
And he basically said, if you want, here's the secret sauce right here. You ready for it? This is just it. If you want to increase your faith, you got to increase your obedience.
It's good.
And if you increase your obedience, guess what happens? Your faith grows because
Yeah.
you see God. You keep seeing God come through. He came through when you started giving a little, and he came through.
Yeah.
He came through when you stepped out of the boat, and he came through. He came through when you stepped out and you shared whatever story he wants you to share. And so,
Yeah.
really, if you want to increase your faith, increase your obedience.
That's awesome. Well, I think we are almost. Are we there? Oh, 5:42.
Let's go.
We're getting even better.
Let's go. Maybe next week if you're
Maybe
with us,
next
we
week
may
we'll do
make it
5 minutes.
5.
But here's what we're gonna do. This is really cool. Last week, Pastor preached on this subject, and we talked a little bit about what maybe your next step might be at the end of the sermon there. And so, if you decided to take a next step this Sunday, I want you to write it in the comments below this video, like right below us, right there somewhere.
Somewhere there.
So go ahead, write down what your next step was. We want to hear it. Share your story with the church. We can't wait to see what God's doing in your guys' lives. Thanks for hanging out for 5 Minutes of Faith for our Fresh Faith series. We'll see you next Wednesday. Peace.